All right, guys, welcome back to episode 3. We're advancing our conversation around leadership with Chef Nyesha Arrington today. In this episode, Chef highlights training other chefs, helping them ascend through the ranks, starting from lower positions like dishwashing all the way up to the top. And I'm obsessed with progression, so hearing about the chain of command in the kitchen got me fired up. You know, around here we borrow language from Ken Wilber in our developmental culture, which says that progression is a process where we transcend and include our previous selves. In Nyesha's kitchen, advancing the ranks looks like mastering the lowest ranks and including those capacities from dishwasher all the way on up to head chef. And that is like the gospel here in the Hold the Standard universe about progression. Before we go too hard in the leadership paint, I do want to give you an update on the gym. What a whirlwind. As of recording this, the gym is nothing like what it was when we first started clearing out this old garage. There was trash everywhere, barrels, tires, tools. There was a lift in the ground that we had to saw out of the ground so that we could have a flat floor. And so we're recording live in this North Campus building on the Deuce campus, and this part of the facility houses our specialty courses. So from early in the morning to late at night, there's a pretty eclectic group of students who come through this part of the campus to train the specialty course curriculums that we offer here. People are diving into things like bodybuilding and weightlifting. There's a powerlifting course. We have an athlete development course where professional baseball players are coming through here. We even have a pain-free movement 101 course where we help people get out of that purgatory of physical therapy and into the gym again after injury. In addition to all the gym stuff, our friends from Strike Movement opened a store right behind me in the North Campus, and you'll see some of that in the video and on our socials. But this is the only brick-and-mortar location in the world that houses the best mixed-use outsole shoes in the world, training apparel. We've added an office, which feels like adult stuff. You know, I feel like a full adult with an office. I brought my ridiculous espresso machine over, which I think is the most important part of the campus, world-class espresso. And the last part that we got to finish is going to be out here. That's where we build the real coffee bar right here on Lincoln Boulevard. And so we're chipping away at that part of the process. So you'll keep getting updates about what's happening on the campus throughout this season. But let's move into this episode. Without further ado, I'm excited for you to hear from Chef Nyesha Arrington. She's one of the kindest, hardest working craft masters I know. And like most masters, she makes it look easy. If you listen carefully in this episode, you'll hear me mention to her that it seems like she learns differently than most people I encounter on a daily basis. And I want to take a moment to highlight this point because in my leadership role and just in adulthood in general, I'm constantly surprised and reminded at how different learning styles can be a source of a lot of heavy emotions, right? When you think about how rigid our school system has been for generations, especially for our generation, I find that high potential killers like Nyesha make a choice to figure out how they learn. Nyesha is brilliant, full stop. And I noticed that she has also done a ton of work kind of behind the scenes to understand herself well enough and how she learns to really be successful in the world. And this world that we live in kind of supports and favors learning styles just arbitrarily. That said, not everyone has the same agency and power that Nyesha has claimed around this, and I just want to highlight that. Because can you imagine someone as powerful as Nyesha not achieving these masterful levels of development? It would be tragic. And I think there's so much to learn from Nyesha, but one of my favorites is that she's a professional student. And it will guarantee endless beauty for her life in how she progresses because of that fact. So I want you to enjoy this episode. Listen for that part about learning styles, and I hope you enjoy. Nyesha, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
I'm so excited you're here. I figure we have so many great conversations that maybe we should record one and
share it with the people.
Be awkwardly public about it. How's that?
Sounds great.
Does that sound good?
Yes.
All right. You know what? We had a conversation, actually. I'm going to start in a peculiar spot. We had a conversation at a Dodger game.
We did.
We had lots of conversations at a Dodger game, but there was a moment where you were telling me about the towel.
Yes.
The towel moment.
Yes.
I'm curious about that for reasons that are probably not that obvious. So just tell us about the towel. When it comes to your routine around being in the kitchen, there's this moment.
There are many moments about a towel. For me, I feel that it's almost like I'll use the term like a security blanket. And also an apron. I'm never going to really attempt to cook in a professional setting or in my home setting generally without the right tools. For sure, a side towel is one of them. And for sure, this side towel has to be folded a particular way when they are on deck, so to speak. I definitely, I think what you're saying about I keep that thing on me, but yeah, so, you kind of suit up, you're attempting to cook, you put your apron on and you slide it to the particular position. For me, that's just over my right hip.
To the right?
Absolutely, because it's accessible, if I need to quickly grab.
Because you're right-handed?
Because I'm right-handed, yeah, I would say that's where I wear it because I'm right-handed,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a towel that goes through the string on the apron?
Exactly.
Is that where it hooks in?
100%.
Holstered in?
Holstered for sure. Slides under, and then it's a single knot, and then a slide.
Oh, there was a knot. That's
yes,
right. Okay,
yes.
knot, then a slide.
Exactly.
Okay.
I feel prepared once that's on me.
That's that thing. I keep that thing on me. Yeah, we chatted about that, and we didn't belabor the topic in the way that we're going to right now, but it was very interesting for me to hear that because I resonated with it, and you used a lot of words just now around feeling prepared and being ready. There's almost like a reverence around the lead up to a performance, right? So how did that develop over time? Did someone model that to you? How did you, it's just 1,000 days in a row of cooking. Like, any of those details are very interesting to me, including this folding action. Like, just tell me about how this came about.
For sure. I think back, in kitchen culture, we use a term called mise en place, which means everything in its place. And, for me, I kind of love to use that as a sort of transferable skill in my life, that the more prepared you are, generally, honestly, you're going to have more fun doing the thing, know. When you're on the back foot and, you don't have your folded towels and they're all in a pile and they might be dirty or they're not on your person, a little more difficult to do the task at hand. So, I think over time and putting those sort of like reps in the kitchens and at home, I prefer to have my sort of toolkit. And I like organization in a way that sets me up for success. So for me, it's this particular fold on a towel, before it goes on my person. Towel's nice and crispy, you know. There's you fold it into thirds. So there's like you fold towards you and then away from you into thirds and then fold up, maybe the right side or the left side and then invert that so they stack up on each other so that there's a reason is that they look very seamless, it just looks put together. And I think that when you put that much pride and integrity into folding your towel, how does that not transfer into a delicious plate?
Right. And it's like several steps away. Maybe you couldn't even draw a straight line from that to some sort of outcome, but I totally resonate with that. I oftentimes, like in the context of this place, and other areas of my life, have to explain this maniacal attention to detail about things that seem so far away. like maybe someone's listening to this and they're like, are they really, we're 4 minutes in, we're talking about how we're folding a towel. But to you, I could tell in our conversation at the game that this was, you weren't kidding. Like, this was very important. And it's interesting that many roads lead to this type of attention to detail. You know, it's not like you read a book. I definitely didn't read a book about the importance of these types of routines. But when I was back in a past life as a baseball player, I would dress from left to right. I would have all these very specific things where I needed in my mind to be meticulous about, to go do the real thing, so to speak. Yeah, it's incredible. You mentioned that there's other things. Do you have other routines that are notable, or what does it look like for you getting ready to do the thing?
Yeah, you know, similar to sort of setting up your toolbox, you know, one aspect of that being the towel folding. You know, in the kitchen, you know, it's the other tools for success. It's a sharp knife. It's great ingredients. You know, I think even a larger puddle of like a ripple and a wave of that thought is like having a healthy mindset. Like, what is the intention when I'm walking into the kitchen? You know, I think it's interesting sort of like bouncing back and forth in tandem between the like analytical thought and the creative thoughts, because that's very much what cooking is. You know, it's both of those sort of left and right brains working at the same time. And that's how I look at like that mise en place setup. It's kind of hard to be successful at putting a delicious plate of food together if a million things didn't happen prior to that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating to me, and I think that that's really why I gravitate towards cooking, is that, you know, at the end of the day, you know, donning a chef coat, saying you're a chef, it's so much more than just, I like to make delicious food, in my opinion, you know? And so for me, it excites me because I think it's one of those career choices that, like, the learning process is incessant.
Yeah.
I will never learn every single thing about my craft. Like, it will always evolve until the end of time. And I will always be able to contribute to it. You know, everyone on this planet eats. Everyone has a story to tell. Everyone celebrates their culture, you know, and there's so many cool avenues and facets of cooking that that excite me, you know, to do that thing. But I really love the process of like the mise en place part of it. Like, for some reason, like, you know, it really sort of lit my soul on fire when I walked into the first kitchen in fine dining. You know, that's really where that sort of school of thought is celebrated.
Right.
In like 2005. This restaurant called Melise in Santa Monica, where the gentleman there went on to become my mentor. I just remember this like very palpable feeling of walking in there, and like, you know, there's like episodes of the Bear where it's like, you know, it's gnarly, you know, it's high tense, it's high pressure, it's not made for the faint of heart, so to speak. But there's such a cool sort of code of ethics, if you will, in a badge of honor and going through that militant sort of thing. So, you know, I say all that to say, you know, with the towel sort of example, it's a ripple and a wave of thought. You know, it's that one thing, but really it means so much more. You know,
totally, 100%. Part of what I'm curious about asking you about is something that you're already bringing up, which is, you mentioned kitchen culture. I have no experience in a kitchen, no background in a kitchen. I never worked in service, but I am fascinated by it, by your profession. And part of what I'm fascinated about is what seems like hierarchy and reverence and tradition. Yes, chef, no chef. And then this, seemingly, I could be wrong, this process of development where many people enter at a certain stage, and you sort of have to earn the right to, you know, boil water and all that.
Sure.
Can you just give me the rundown, if there is one in general, of what's the organizational structure back there? What's the rank of responsibility? The brigade, is that a word?
Yes.
Okay, the brigade. Tell me about the brigade and like what one might do to ascend through that?
Yeah, so, generally, and to your point, it very much is about that internal development, for the sustainability of business, sustainability of the craft of cooking. It's so vast, it's so technical that it's important to learn the foundation of skill and really build on that. Generally you're going to start, if not on the dishwashing station or steward or porter, all synonymous terms. Then you start at the level of like salad or prep or garde manger, which is where I started. In some kitchens they have like garde manger 1, 2, and 3, which is what I did in this restaurant called Giraffe. Chef Rafael Luneta, this is 2001. I graduated culinary school off Ocean Park in 2002, and went to intern there. And I'd go there after school, and it was a very hot, intense, passionate kitchen. And I would go downstairs and do all the prep work and just wanting to keep my eye on the prize and get to the line, get to like boil the water,
right.
And it's hard, you make a lot of like mistakes that, how to learn, how to stay behind and move and be agile and think, you really learn how to think and prioritize your thoughts, you know, and really distill down in moments notice what is important to execute.
Yeah.
And so, I started in garde manger and then, sort of moved my way up. From salad station, the gentleman, Raphael, who had that restaurant, his best friend, Josiah, who ran Melisse restaurant, they ended up opening a restaurant called Lemon Moon. I went there, sort of moved my way up the ranks to sous chef.
Okay.
And it was cool, that was where I felt the first light, I think, of a very palpable energy and fire within me. I remember one specific service that we had, and I was just getting hammered, like crushed. Like we had just opened, a lot of responsibility on me. I generally was like trying to like do my best, and I think the higher ups saw that, and so what did I get? More responsibility. So I was like, cool,
That's the joke. That joke is like, there's this unique thing at my work where if you do your job well, you just get more work.
Totally, totally.
So you earned yourself more work.
100%. And I was like, cool. Like,
she didn't die.
There we go. Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
give her more.
100%.
Okay.
So I was like, I just remember the one service, and I was like making the paninis, and
like you do.
Yeah, as one does. And I'm like just banging him out, and the chef, he comes in, he's on the line. And I'm like, my heart's racing. I'm doing things like sweating. And he's like, yeah, go Nyesha, or something like, Eye of the Tiger, like all that shit. I don't know, but it really ignited this thing in me, like, hell yes, like, let's go, Okay. And I was like, oh, I love this, like, I think there was like this validation moment of like, I'm giving it my all. People are loving it, getting great feedback from the guests, and the chef's seeing it, and my peers are seeing it, and it just really, that I think was like the start of it, for me.
Did you know you were like kind of good at that moment or not really?
I don't know if I was like, I try to always really do a good job, man. Like, I think I chronically am like very tough on myself and saying, I can do better.
Yeah.
Maybe, like looking back, I think I was just really excited to do it.
Right.
And just never wanted to like do a bad job,
Yeah, of course. And before we move on from the brigade, I'm curious about, did each level feel hard?
Definitely.
So what remind me of what the salad prep level? Garde manger. Okay.
Yes.
So you're at garde manger. Is the feeling like, man, I shouldn't be over here? Or are you just kind of stretched by that challenge in a way that you're like, I need to get great at this, and I'm not. Or like, what does that feel like?
Great question. Yeah, for me, I was always like, okay, I'm starting here. I think that if I crush it here, I'll be able to move up.
Right.
But I think when I started, like when I went to culinary school and I sat in class the first day, whereas like in high school, like I might have sat like in the back of the class, whatever. In culinary school, I sat dead center, front row, and I was like, stoked. And I remember that day, first day the chef started talking, Chef Chapman, he started talking about stocks and sauces, and like it was like this epiphany of a lifetime of like all the stars aligned in my life, and I was like, I'm doing the thing I'm supposed to do with my life. I just couldn't drink up the knowledge quick enough.
That's incredible.
Yeah, really cool. And so I think for me, when I look at those positions, I'm like, okay, cool. Like Garmager, I just want to crush it. You know, I don't think there was ever this like I should be over there thing, because honestly, I think I had the North Star of like, I'm going to do the thing, you know, I'm never not going to be a chef.
Mm-hmm.
Like even when I was a kid, I would like play house and like have my friends come over and I would like cook soup like as a kid. And
I've heard you say that before. So
Yeah.
this was decided. You
Yeah.
were just doing the steps,
Yeah.
but you knew where you were going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Incredible.
So it's cool, you know. Sure, I mean, there's probably like micro things like in different restaurants where I was like, oh, like, I don't know, like maybe I want to move up faster, or like, you know, there wasn't positions opened and you have to put in your time, you know, it's all part of it. But,
yeah.
you know.
They say there's this kind of a beautiful intersection with confidence and humility. Mm. And it sounds like you had some of that. You're like, listen, I know where I'm going.
Yes.
There's like no doubt. I don't need to learn from somebody else that I could be good at this. But a humility of like, no, I need to do this well. And like,
yeah,
you know, yeah,
absolutely. You know, and I think that comes from, I have this, you know, I just like to, I like to play on teams. You know, I think I've said this in the past, and I think that the skills that set me up to be in the kitchen were playing team sports. I grew up playing softball. I played soccer in high school, and I've been in martial arts since I was 5 years old. From 5 to 17, I took 6 different styles of martial arts. Mm-hmm. So I think that really taught me how to show up, you know, how to have discipline. And I think above anything else, that discipline foundation was the thing that was like probably where I didn't have that like envious character trait of being like, I shouldn't be doing this. Like there's probably a reason I'm doing this.
Right.
You know, so it's a building block. But it's like, yeah.
Yeah. The experience with team sports and martial arts, in hindsight, I don't have a background in martial arts. It's like a new thing for me. But in team sports, I have a background in team sports. I don't know how much I knew that was serving me all the time. However, this is so good.
Hold for sound.
Yeah, we should acknowledge what we're at the one and only Deuce Gym.
The one and only.
Yeah. And it's the noisiest, most beautiful place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually through experiencing other adults. This is going to sound
as a kid.
Potentially rude. No, as an adult. Working near, close with, interrelating with other adults who did not have that background, that I realized that this was something that was a bit unique. And that sort of dovetails into, I want to talk to you about a lot, but you mentioned teams. So team sports is obviously a very contrived way to look at teams. But then in a culinary perspective, we're all adults here. We've got to figure out how to work together. Do you notice that it's difficult to meet on a certain level with folks who don't have certain backgrounds, or, you know, you have a unique level of discipline and a unique relationship with showing up and doing mundane tasks at a certain level of excellence because of your background. But when you're 30, you know, meeting another 30-year-old who maybe doesn't have that experience, does that feel like difficult to create teams and teach lessons that maybe you learned as a child or something?
Sure. You know, in full transparency, I think I've played on both sides of that. You know, I think coming into the game at an early age, right, 17, I entered my illustrious culinary career at a fancy fast food restaurant called Taco Bell.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I started.
Okay.
And, you know, from there...
That's amazing.
Went to some other restaurants and all of that, putting the years, putting the reps, doing the things, you know, coming out of Giraffe, going to Melise, you know, moving out of state, living life, doing life, you know, 20s, 30s, you know, then I'm moving up the brigade, the hierarchy from the garmager to, you know, there's the fish cook, there's the meat cook, there's sous chef, executive chef, chef partner, you know, I've sort of run that brigade. And then, you know, you start, you know, collecting data and life and learning what works, what doesn't work. And I've been on successful teams. I've led my own teams, and like, I think that, it's interesting because I think who I am today, as I take stock in inventory and had the opportunity to, I think really doing the TED Talk was like the first time I really like sort of looked up from the stove and the proverbial life cutting board, and was able to kind of take inventory and be like, where are we at, and I think it's interesting, I think that, so I think I've lived on both sides of that, of like being on successful, of like being on successful teams, and also running my own teams, and learning a lot about myself as a leader, what works, what type of leader I am, and what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah. The first season of this podcast, it had a different structure, but the focus was mainly on individual expression and finding our peak expression, and some of that obviously is going to come up in this conversation. But part of what I think will make this season of conversations unique is looking at leadership as a boots on the ground Monday reality, and so I'm really curious about this team element. There's an example, and I hope I'm not being disparaging here. This might be a little controversial, but stay with me. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, but I teach this course on leadership, and sometimes this example shows up around creating teams. And what I'm trying to do is acknowledge that in an industry like this one, it's kind of like cheating. Everyone is here because of a high purpose drive. And I realize that we're very lucky to be in an industry where people will quit a regular job to come to the light and like live their passion. And no one's here cashing a check is sort of what I mean. And that's one extreme. And then the other extreme, and I always use CVS because it's across the street. Okay, these are the types of businesses, not being disparaging to people who work at CVS. But if we're to stereotype, maybe no one cares. The manager doesn't care. The people who are there, everybody is sort of just like, no one, when they were 5 or 7 years old, was dreaming of this job. And that's fine or whatever. But I think that's, you can rally behind a culture with that pretty easily. Just like, hey, we're here to do a job. I'm here to do a job. You're here to do a job. Can we make it happen? Fist bump. Let's go. I think about your industry all the time as to how difficult it might be, because you have folks like yourself who are subject matter experts. You're a master of a craft in so many ways, devoted your life to this, and not all the time is your team living that life. To stereotype in Los Angeles, maybe you have a team of people who kind of want to be actors. You know what I mean? And it presents a potential challenge that is really interesting to me. Like, how do you build a team in that industry that is remarkable? And I can imagine there's like so many challenges with that. I mean, I'm just curious about, you mentioned successful teams and maybe teams that weren't successful or had their own dysfunctions. Like talk about how difficult it is to get people pointed in the same direction when maybe not everybody is living your dream.
Yeah, and I think that to answer that sort of eloquently, I think that is an answer I can only share living through experience. The first restaurant I opened called Leona, it was 2014, and I think that was the best team. Not to speak negatively about other teams. I think the best expression of like what our goal was. We all really rallied around this incredible restaurant. The soul of that restaurant, the essence of what we were trying to share with people, emanated through that building so beautifully.
It's amazing when that happens.
Are you kidding me? Yeah. It's priceless. I'll never forget standing on the pass, and this gentleman walked in off the street, and I watched him walk in, busy service, diners, all the hustle and bustle of a restaurant, and he walked in, sort of looking around, and I said, "May I help you, sir?" And he's like, "No, I just wanted to walk in and feel the energy of this place. It drew me in." And, we went on to have an incredible conversation, and, I shared that I was the chef of the place and all the things, and he became one of our best customers. But That's that sort of intangible thing that you want to create, and that is, I feel, when people are like, oh, bad energy or vibes or whatever, like that's the team emanating that out of their body. Like you can't buy that, you can't, so like it was cool, it was a cool experience to lead that. It was in Venice, and it was after my first restaurant where I was a chef at, and and then fast forward, I think after that restaurant closed, it was a very different experience leading a different team, and I think I was like trying to recreate that, but I think there were like some missing pieces in that, and like it was a very arduous uphill battle. I was doing a lot of questioning about like myself, who am I as a leader, like who am I as a human? Like it was just an interesting sort of life experience thing. Yeah. And it was like shortly just before the pandemic, and it didn't feel as put together, as a team, and I think it sort of comes back to the thought of like the garde manger, the salad guy, the pastry guy, and who does what. I think when you can individually really do your task at hand really well, like that's what makes up a great team, and the why and the buy-in of why you're there, and people talk about leading by example, and those things. I think they're very important, and I think more so these days, being on teams in different capacities, leading teams also, wearing different hats per the day, 7 days a week. More so these days, I'm learning what true leadership is, more so than ever in my life, even at 40, and so that's pretty cool. I think that's what life is about, is like living that true human experience,
Yeah, that's epic. And it's so, what I love about leadership, one of the things I love about leadership is that it's hard. Yeah. Like you're never, it's like what you talked about, trying to nail it again with that second team. It's like, Alabama football or the Yankees or the Lakers. It's like, how do we keep doing this excellent thing? And it comes and goes. Yeah. I want to ask you about a specific tactic as an ignorant person, and then just tell me to go away if it's not real. But and it's really a lead-in question as to like what you might do specifically, if there are things that come to mind if you were creating a team today. But what is this fascination with scrambling an egg as like a audition or like tryout? Is that a thing?
100%.
It is. So it's like repeated, and a lot of people do it, or what's the deal with it?
So the deal with it, that's a great question. Is that it as a chef, and you're maybe putting someone on trial to see. You're gonna learn a lot from that person with how they handle a pan with an egg in it. Right. Eggs are very, how do I say? They're gonna tell you what they want done to them, right? So like, eggs can be very delicious. They could also be very bad, right? So it's like, what pan choice is this person going to grab? Generally, you're not gonna be like, here's your pan, here's your salt, here's your butter, here's your eggs, I've scrambled them for you. You give them
You'll
whole
let
eggs
them
and let
make
them,
that choice.
And that's going to tell you a lot. Is this person grabbing a non-stick pan? Are they grabbing a cast iron or stainless steel? I think just from that sort of foundation, it's going to tell you a lot. What's the heat control on the element? How are they cracking the egg? Are they straining the eggs or the shells in it? How are they seasoning them? But ultimately it's about the heat control, because, the element, the fire, that's really what's going to determine how the eggs come out in the end, So if you can control that pan, pull it off the heat, put it back on, and those eggs become really sexy, like that's going to tell you a lot about how that person really cares about product.
Right. You would, you'd have to turn away watching me make eggs.
You
for
think?
The first. No, probably it would be a tolerable experience now, but for the first 30-something years of my life, I couldn't have fathomed that the temperature of the heat or the intensity of the heat
Yes.
mattered, other
Yes.
than like this will take longer.
Yes, yes, it's rational.
So I'm just like, let's hurry up.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's not
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I was just very curious about that. And what it seemed like to me, so this is just my ignorant point of view, getting excited about something that maybe isn't as true as I want to make it, which is I'm obsessed with how teams get built, right? So if someone has to audition for this team and then there's this weird tryout where you got to cook an egg in front of somebody you admire, it's like, oh my God, like this whole thing. What I notice and perpetually teach as if it's true so far in my life, is that great teams have these sort of built-in rites of passage. And sometimes they're explicit, like we just talked about. Like maybe if I'm a new guy and I knock on the door of a Michelin star place and the rumor mill is that you're going to have to scramble an egg in front of so-and-so, it creates this barrier where maybe on the other side of that, I realize I'm on a team where everybody had to scramble the egg. And that's maybe a small example, but there's this kind of like bonding thing. Sometimes those rites of passage are much less explicit, like I've played on sports teams where it's like, no, there wasn't some, you didn't have to jump through fire to be on this team. But you did by being recruited or something like that, to where it creates this locker room feeling or whatever. Have you ever had like specific hiring tactics or, I guess today, it would be interesting today with your growth around leadership and what you've been through, successes, failures, like would you do something different to like filter for who works with you?
That's a great question. Well, I'm going to answer that by saying I think it first starts with me. I think one of the tactics for me is lifestyle, and even specifically like my wellness routine. For me, having hobbies outside of cooking is very important to me these days. I prioritize more so than ever, whereas before, and maybe I just didn't have the bandwidth, but cooking and running the business consumed me in such an almost unhealthy way,
Yeah.
And I really couldn't see much out of that scope,
Yeah.
So really, nothing else really mattered. No relationship other than me and that making that business work, to the best of my ability.
100. Yeah.
And so, I think now having gone through those failures, it's really widened my perspective. So I would say first, that would be a different tactic because of the lived experience of learning what worked and what didn't work. I would say, tactics in terms of team building is so different these days. As I learn and talk with my peers who run businesses now, I hear often, oh, wow, what a different climate it is, how challenging it is, like employee retention, all the things, and, how challenging it is with like labor costs and food costs, labor costs and food costs, and how exponentially those costs have gone up to do business. So, I think that businesses have had to tweak a bit in terms of like, whereas before you might work off the clock for hours and hours and hours, like those things aren't a thing anymore.
Those days are over.
Yeah.
Yeah. People got boundaries now.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, ultimately, I think the people that are going to want to be there are going to be there. I think that's very important. I do quite a bit of sort of parties all around Los Angeles, different sort of activations and things. I have a network and a crew that I work with in rotation of like 10 people, and all of them have side gigs, they have hustles, they have their own things going on, they have agency over their life.
Right.
And I think that is exciting, for this new wave of talent and people.
Yeah.
They want to feel valued, I think that wasn't a thing when I was coming up.
Yeah.
In my experience,
kind of like
much.
Disposable gnarliness.
Totally.
Yeah, all
Totally.
that. Yeah,
totally.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
I can see where that. I'm not trying to make these industries the same, but I do see a lot of that in conservative baseball. It's like we're going to take pride in, and I'm talking about me, like I'm going to take pride in this being hard, and I can't wait to give your job to somebody else because a lot of people want to do this, and all that. There is a shadow to that, though, and I think that what you're describing is an elevated expression of how to be. One of my questions, I did come prepared for this, believe it or not.
We're not actually just hanging and talking.
Yeah. No, one of my questions was, it came up because a good friend of mine, Harvey Martin, I think we spoke about Harvey.
Yes.
Yeah. He's a coach with the San Francisco Giants, an incredible former ball player, incredible mind. And he was offering this lesson to us in a workshop here about the characters we play. And I thought of you, obviously, coming into this conversation because I'm not you, but I perceive you as someone who, just like you've said, probably has much more autonomy over those characters and much more, many more boundaries in place. When I see you riding your bike in town and you have time with your dog and you have these times, we spoke on Sunday, you're like, Sunday's not for that.
No.
And all these things that probably weren't always present. And the lesson that Harvey was sort of offering was a review of your life and all of these characters you played. And he started as like, I was a paper boy when I was 9, and then I was a student in college, and I was a college baseball player, and then I was a scout for the Brewers, all these different jobs he had. And the punchline is sort of like, well, if the last day that I was a paper boy, if you asked me who I am, I would have said I'm a paper boy, but the next day that wasn't true. So like, who am I? And that's a silly example. The more profound one is he identified, like we all do in that world, as an athlete, but then one day you're not one. And it sort of just begs the question, like, are you that thing, or is that just a role you play? And I'm just curious if that resonates with you. If 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if I asked you, what's your deal? You would be like, I'm a chef. But now maybe it's
100%.
It's maybe a part of a bigger life, and you have many hats, and you can kind of hold those all in space. Does that feel true for you?
100%. It's such a great way to put that. I think the chef is really just the vehicle for the thoughts that I like to sort of, the way that I like to frame my thoughts, because I think that being a chef, it does, for me, it hits all the notes of science and creativity and, numbers and organization and all the things, I think that's, my brain is wired that it has that grid to like love that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think the reason I say that really is because I really enjoy being a growth-oriented person. I enjoy that. And I think, I feel very fortunate that I found something that I like to do every day, being food, because I think that is a celebration of Mother Nature, and it's an act of servitude, that brings me joy, to create something that gets to, again, be a celebration of Mother Nature. I'm often at the farmer's market. It gets to nourish someone else's person, and it feels good to do things like that out of servitude, and so I think these days, 100%, 10, 15 years ago, it was the Anthony Bourdain days of like, I'm a chef. Like I was about that life. Like, on the grind, on the line, burns, cuts, bruises, tears, all the things. It was just gnarly, But I think these days it's like less of that, but more of like, but similar mindset, and just this idea of like grit and like really wanting to put in the work for the reward of the payoff of doing it well.
Yeah, but it's both, right? I think that it should be said that you didn't skip steps on your path to where you are. You know, it's like to have it as a part of your bigger whole wasn't half-stepping. You went all the way in and did the thing.
I did it definitely the hard way.
It's beautiful to hear your passion around it and that you found that thing. I think a lot of people don't know what that thing is.
Absolutely.
When you said the lecture about stocks and sauces, let you know that you found your calling. I think you found it, because I'd be like, I don't know, like, are we out of here yet? You know, that's pretty special.
No, but I think it's similar. Like, you know, when I think about your field and how you are such a great coach, you know, my stock is, you know, you're breaking down the snatch, right. You know?
Yeah.
It's so cool because I get it, you know, and you're saying like the waves, it's like a wave of, like, it's like those moments, they stick, you know, those cues and things.
It's a pleasure to have you in those rooms, because I notice you as a learner.
Oh,
you know,
interesting.
That's actually something I wanted to ask you about, which is, I don't know, I think we're all somewhat self-aware, but maybe not ever like fully, right? I perceive you, and correct me if I'm wrong or this doesn't resonate, I perceive you as a very passionate learner, but my sense is that you learn in a unique way.
Interesting.
Does that resonate at all? I mean, I guess you've been you your whole life, but so maybe that's just how you do it. But have you noticed by like comparison in like a school environment or something like that, because you're obviously a genius in this world of the culinary world, but my sense is that the way you learn is very unique.
Interesting. Well, I think that the best way, you know, of being Nyesha my whole life, I think I learn and retain information audibly, visually, and then doing the thing multiple times until I don't suck at it. Like, and then repeat it a couple times, you know, audibly, visually, do the thing. Like, I think that's how I learn best. And maybe not audibly so much. Like, sometimes I'm just thinking about butterflies. I know you just said how many.
No, I totally resonate with it. I'm auditorily brutal. Like, if you're talking to me and one person just says any other thing, I melt into a puddle on the ground, and I do not have a cerebral cortex anymore, and I can't function. Like not even a little bit. You know what I mean? And anyway, it's cool to see. In one of my character roles, I play a teacher of movement here, you know, and I think every teacher just wants to have an interested learner, and you really have that. It's really cool to see. You know?
I appreciate that. You know, and similar, and you know, I want to just say, when I'm around people such as yourself who are so passionate about what they do, and they really can break down the information in a way that's digestible, and once you want to learn it, you know, it's super cool. You know, it's very exciting, and I like to share knowledge in a similar fashion. You know, it's super cool. Yeah,
there's probably something about the way your teacher was talking about stocks and sauces that captivated the audience.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? I talk about that a lot in our coaches development perspective. It's like, you know, I think our industry, maybe this resonates with your industry as well. I think it's a common thing in many skill-based crafts, which is sometimes the goalpost can shift into a direction that is not helpful, which is we misunderstand this pursuit of excellence as it's like a badge of honor how much you know. And I'll tell you, there's probably more people in the world that know more about movement than ever in the history of modern humanity. But it just doesn't matter if people don't care what you have to say, you know? And that's probably true in food, you know? It's an interesting time. I'm curious to hear how you feel about maybe these waves of the culinary world. obviously you've had many roles. One of them is the show, and that's not a thing that would have happened 20 years ago, right? There's an attention and a fascination and a respect for this craft that's put you in some ways like the teacher role.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you think about the folks that are on the show, what do you worry about? What do you like wish they would get? Or I look at people who are coming up in a craft, and it's usually the teachers who are like they can see further than them.
Dude,
right?
100%.
And I think about, without having any experience in the kitchen, I would imagine that your perspective is like when you're sending these people, these little whippersnappers, off into the world.
Yes.
You're kind of like, tighten your shoes tight.
Yep.
And yep. It's like, what are you hoping to instill? Or I guess the way I look at things is through a pessimism to like hedge. Only acutely. I think about pessimism as a tool to get ahead of potential problems,
of
like
course.
fear-based things.
Of
You know
course.
what I mean? Like, what are you hoping that the like next generation of chefs is like prepared to do? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Interesting. Logan, I think there's a lot of vulnerability in these the next generation that didn't really necessarily exist at other times.
Right.
In that they're such individuals. I don't think there's one recipe for everyone.
Right.
If that makes sense. Okay. I think, when I look at different character types that come through that show, and I'm in these very quick, high-pressure teacher roles, it's like my responsibility to give the information as quickly and effectively, with like hopefully kind of looking good at the same time. Like, it's such a thing, Like, how am I holding my face? Yeah. Am I saying the words? Are you getting me? Okay, now I got to run over here and do it to this guy. Am I facing the camera? Yeah. Am I smiling? Like, it's a lot,
I can tell you were dropping the lingo before this thing. You know all about the camera setup, or sound check. Yeah.
So and it's like, okay, and it's kind of like I'm taking inventory. Every day we go on these cooks. I'm like, okay, this guy's knife cuts. He needs to work on the organization of his cutting board. When he grabs the ingredients, like maybe set them to the right so that you have a station to the left. You can work right to left. Systems. Maybe this other person shouldn't have put cream with the octopus. Like, that didn't work. Remember that dish didn't taste good. Like, right. Let's work on like fundamentals of like high acid with seafood, or just like basics that they can like really work with. I'm just giving them macro things that they can plug in their personality into.
Yeah.
And so I think whereas in previous years it was really all about the celebration, generally speaking, about French fine dining was kind of the only way.
It's like you're doing our program is maybe how that felt, right? Versus
yes.
like them doing their own program.
Absolutely. And I have said this in the past, is like before it was like you generally saw like family meal, being these like bold, delicious, maybe Asian, Latin flavors, cultures celebrated at all of the cooks who are just like tired, but also stoked to like do service and do the things, and it's this rally and you're all eating family meal together, and it wasn't the food we were cooking in the restaurant, you know what I mean? And it's like these days it's kind of flipped, where it's like those culture foods, the tacos, the dumplings, whatever, are now like pop-ups, cool pop-ups and things around LA and beyond, that are way more, have earned that seat at the table, for the public, whereas before it was like enjoyed in the back,
Yeah, I think that connects almost on accident to what you were saying about building teams. Like when I asked you about that, it seemed like your gut reaction was to go to the individual, like how are they existing, and you mentioned like their lifestyle, and whereas an earlier or more archaic view is sort of like, this is our program, get in line or get out kind of world. As you were talking, I was reminded of this this interview I heard with Kenneth Cole. This is a bit random, but Kenneth Cole finished this interview with one of the most aware, profound statements I've heard about this sort of changing culture, and I didn't expect it coming from him as like an old kind of shoe dog fashion guy. Someone asked him, "What's the future of Kenneth Cole?" And he said, "The future of Kenneth Cole, it recognizes that today the consumer perceives themselves as a brand, and we have to be the type of brand that can co-brand with their story." Right? It's a very individualistic thing. Like, everybody has this individual expression that can exist now, whereas you think about fashion in 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, you would align yourself with a brand externally, right? And that's a shifting thing, and I think it's going to be important for us working together in the future, you know. And so anyway, tangent, but I think that's a leadership thing that we are going to have to integrate. You know, how are we going to live in a world that is becoming increasingly individualistic and
absolutely,
and not necessarily a bad way?
No, it's not. I think it's a natural evolution post-industrial revolution. Like, you know, now we have all these brands and different businesses that have been built, and now it's kind of the natural evolution of that fallout of the distillation. Like, it becomes more small and individualistic, and obviously with the World Wide Web, everyone has access to information, and it's fascinating seeing and living it, you know. Yeah, absolutely.
I would be remiss not to make this connection, but it feels like, as an outside observer, that the lifestyle around being a chef is changing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've witnessed a lot of that here. The amount of chefs here is oddly high.
Yeah.
And I'm not claiming that we are like the reason for that. I'm just observing chefs shifting away from a lifestyle that, so I hear, was pretty gnarly back in the day. And it's interesting that almost all of these silos or communities that are resistant to health and wellness and longevity and learning ourselves and what we need to do to get on stage, to get on the field, to get on the X Games ramp, is looking like taking care of ourselves. It's interesting that all roads sort of lead to that. You know, it's like the greatest rock bands of all time that are still doing it have somehow all figured out that it's not, you know, whiskey and blow anymore, right? It's like green juice and yoga. And I would imagine that you have straddled this transition, you know, and so what do you notice around chefs, counterpart, you know, people in your world coming into movement? Everybody's got an ice bath all of a sudden. We're kind of taking care of ourselves. It seems like a great time to be in this community that's changing.
Yeah, you know, that statement, question is very near and dear to my heart. It's very personal. It's very, it definitely drives a lot of my development and who I am, who I want to be. You know, what my legacy is. I hope I don't get emotional, or maybe I hope I do. But no, you know, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, I'm listening to you speak, and I'm feeling so much gratitude because this place has changed my life.
Oh, wow.
It has. You know, before coming here, it was like 2019 is really when I started learning about fitness, you know, like other than like playing sports and like doing those things. I never played at a professional level, but you know, I think for me, weightlifting and just, you know, being a part of this community, it has changed my life exponentially. And it's so cool, you know, even just in my personal community outside of the gym and in the food world, so many more people have prioritized fitness and their daily routines from what I share on my socials or how I'm showing up different, you know, because I for sure partook in the like late nights and the I don't have feelings. Like, I'm just gonna go drink whiskey with the boys or whatever,
Right.
you know, like,
Right.
this is what we do. Like,
Yeah.
it's not that cool. Like,
Totally. We joked before the show where, if it's okay to say, you were like, I took a nap earlier. And I was like, dude, that's the thing we don't talk about.
Yeah.
But all of the ballers,
Yeah.
we're napping.
Yeah.
We're all napping.
you know, so important, man. Like, it's important to show up and do the things, you know. But yeah, you know, because once I started to like learn, you know, about my CNS and like fight or flight and
Look at
like,
you go.
you know what I mean? Like, it just,
So somatically informed.
I mean, my circadian rhythm is just really on point.
It's amazing. Yeah.
You know, but I learned, you know, like, maybe I'm not gonna like do as well as and it's not a comparison to another person. It's a me thing. Like, maybe I'm not gonna run that mile as quick as I would have liked to,
Right.
if I didn't prioritize what I'm putting in my body, you know. And those are personal triumphs, you
Yeah.
know, when
Yeah.
you feel good about
Totally.
stuff like that, you
Totally.
know, 100%. So I just know I'm showing up as a better person because of those things, you know, for my family, for my dog.
Yeah, and it's not like, no joke.
Yeah.
There's a modeling thing that happens where you're sort of, not that you're going around telling everybody they need a front squat, but
Yeah.
by being you in this way, people are shown a way of being.
Yeah.
That's, I think,
Absolutely.
important, you know.
No, it's so inspiring, man. People reach out, you know, randomly will find my email and send me an email and say, hey, I'm really enjoying what you're posting on socials, workout-wise, wellness-wise, or like prioritizing drinking a water, you know,
Right.
like things that are not talked about or were not at one point in the field of cooking. You know, it's
Right.
quite the opposite. And but I think the world in general, we just have way more access to information. People want, like you said, you know, for the longevity, for the legacy, want to show up and like feel like you're in your skin, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate how you show up around here, and it's obviously noticed by folks. I had a fun conversation about this with Antonia a few years back, and it's like, better coming from you than me, you know? Like, of course I'm going to, like, talk about some propaganda about taking care of yourself. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
that modeling is so important. I want to talk about what you're excited about right now. I've heard you talk on panels, and I see you doing all these things in the world around food. Obviously, food is critical to us as humans. But there's a lot we're not doing well about food supply and all that. And I know you're very passionate about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, you know, I've always kind of seen, you know, even when I was a kid, I remember I was maybe 7, like rollerblading in my front yard or something, literally.
Yeah.
And like my mom was like watching Oprah or something, and like I remember like just skating around, and like I was like, I think I want to live like a cool life. Like, I want to do cool things, you know? Like, I just
Okay.
remember that as a kid. And, like, for me, that when I thought about that, and I remember, like, it was, like, a really sunny day. I don't know, random setting things I'm sharing with the class. But just remember, like, it was just the sun was really bright that day. And I thought, like, wow, like, it would be cool to do, like, philanthropic work, you know, and just community-based work.
Right.
So, like, now having done, you know, learned a lot about my craft, you know, which started with like product identification, you know, learning all the mushrooms, how do mushrooms want to be cooked, learning how to cook different cuts of beef or whatever, you know, going through that whole thing of the last 20 plus years, now sort of being in media and that over the last few years. You know, what I'm excited about towards the future is just like, how do I better my community, you know, and work with like, I think for me, it's demystifying that, like, you don't just have to go to the grocery store. You can go to the farmer's markets. You can, you know that a carrot does come out of the ground. You know, it doesn't come in a package, you know. And furthering that, like, dissonance, you know, the other day I was in an airport and I saw these, like, beautiful display of apples, and they were all, like, individually wrapped in plastic, and I thought that was so odd. I was like, why are these apples? They're already come packaged. Like Mother Nature did it for us. Like why is it in plastic? It's so weird. And I think it's just like I don't want us to regress, away from like this hunter-gatherer root system that we are as Homo sapiens. Like for me, that shit, like I love that. I feel like I'm my best self when I share and when I think about life that way. And so, for me, what am I excited about? Like potentially working with the Compton School District on building like a community garden with the kids.
Okay.
So we're in early talks with that, but that's really kind of lighting my soul on fire. So it's things around that,
Yeah. Nature has a lot of practice at this. Nature's got a good thing going, I think. And there's like a lot of ego around the idea that we know better in a lot of ways. I think I told you the story. Did we talk about the Dan Barber story where he's working on the line? Okay, so you would know the woman who had the Michelin star place in NorCal? Waters?
Alice Waters.
Alice Waters.
Yep.
What was the name of her place?
Chez Panisse.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay, so Chef Dan Barber was on the line there, as he says in his story about this. And I think he is one of the places in the brigade that you would know about. And he observed a dish leave the dessert station.
Yes.
And it's going out to be served. And he did a double take because he was like, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? And he was. What he was seeing was a plate with a single peach, uncut, unsalted, no olive oil. And this is a Michelin-starred place. And a dessert item was I believe, Nishimura peach. And it's a farmer who grows the world's best peaches. And Chef Waters her sort of statement about this was, I can't do better than a great peach. And that hits hard.
No, I mean, that's it right there. Like my heart literally fluttered like that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And I'm obsessed with high performers, and he is one, and I follow him on Instagram, and just to bring the story full circle, she visited Bluestone Hill Farms, his place in New York, and he was happy to serve her an unadulterated asparagus, believe it or not, which that seemed like a bigger challenge. You know what I mean? But he sort of like brought it back to her and said, we have found the perfect asparagus kind of thing. It's just really kind of cool.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's really just removing all the extra stuff, you know, like it's cool, so I think, but it's interesting. I think it's part of the circle of life. You kind of, I think maybe when you get older, you kind of just want to simplify things. But, I think it's been a really cool kind of like journey lived thus far. And now I really find myself really enjoying like putting my hands in the soil and like seeing the fruits of the labor, like quite literally, you know? It's cool.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. I love talking with you, and I feel like it's always fun, and I always learn from you. Is there anything else that you want to share that you're excited about, or anything that you wish people asked you, or questions for me?
Okay, so like when you're in the back squat position. No, I'm just kidding.
Knees out, chest up. That's it.
Great. Cool.
Yeah.
What else? No, this has been great. I've been looking forward to this. I also enjoy chatting with you. You have a brilliant mind. And, I really enjoy being here. I mentioned, this place has truly changed my life. And really, I should say enriched. I don't know if it changed much, but it's really enriched my life. And it's exciting, you asked some really great questions. Cool.
Tell the people where to find you. Where can people find you?
If I'm not at Deuce Gym, you can find me out in the world. I am the co-host of a show called Next Level Chef. It's on Fox Network. I also run a I also host a digital series called Plate Worthy, which is produced by Eater, where we travel around to different cities and meet chefs and taste really bomb food. And on the socials, you can find me at Nyesha Joyce, NYESHAJOYCE, my middle name. I think it's across all platforms. I always wanted to say that.
You did so good. You crushed it. Yeah. All right, guys, that's a wrap on episode 3. We heard Chef Nyesha talk about the high-pressure environment of the kitchen, where teamwork and preparation are essential to success. And I want to call attention to that because, ironically, listening to a podcast like this is great, but also you've got to get in the fire. There's no amount of theoretical understanding of growth that can replace just the fact that you need to go to your edge in order to grow. I got to meet the fringe levels of what I could do developmentally, first kind of on the baseball field. Nyesha found that same feedback loop for her in the kitchen. I've got to ask you, where are you holding yourself to the fire? Next episode, you're going to hear from another chef, world-renowned chef, Chef Antonia Lofaso. She's going to be talking about the importance of navigating personal and professional challenges through leadership. Chef Antonia's career obviously speaks for itself, but when you hear that her rise to the top was not this straight shot to the title, you'll understand better what we're offering when we say that leadership is the greatest path to overcoming our most important challenges.
Do you want to be great, or do you just want to do things mediocre? You know what I mean? And then really point out the fact of what it entails to be great, and then the choices that you make and how that reflects mediocrity, And then just in that moment, what are you choosing to do? What are you choosing to be for the rest of your life?
100%.
You know what I mean? I would pose that question to them. It's not about me telling somebody anything. Let them make the choice. Do I want to do something fucking great in my lifetime, or I just want to cruise? For the record, cruising is totally fine.
Yeah. Let's just be clear that that's what's happening.
But let's be super clear.
Yeah.
On why you don't have the things that you're saying that you want, okay? Is because all of your actions are mediocre.